Kojo, 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 Kojo.
So we'll get started. We have had some dynamic rescheduling and a couple of our panelists should be joining in the next 5 minutes, but we'll get started directly with this topic. Now, the topic that has been given to us is quite interesting. It's we're talking about the inevitable rise of India. But many people here, including all the people on our panel, we have had a brief discussion, and some of you will have the same question in mind. Is it inevitable? Is everything inevitable? And there are a lot of challenges. So what we'll try to do on this panel is get the perspective from all my co-panelists and hear from them what they see as the path for India from an economic growth standpoint, and more importantly, what are the challenges that they see, and do they agree with what they see as the opportunities, and what are their solutions or their suggestions that need to be undertaken to address some of these challenges. So, Jaggi, let's start directly with you. You have, when we have had a brief discussion, you have talked about some of the challenges specifically, including about jobs and specifically about that portion of the economy. So, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Paranjape. So, basically, the topic is probably wrongly labeled. There is nothing inevitable about anything in life. There is nothing inevitable about the fact that the world will continue to grow when we had 3 years of very poor growth due to COVID, the Ukraine-Russia war, and so many things, right? So, we've got to get many things right, and we have to get many things right in a very difficult geopolitical and economic situation, right? So, our strengths are very obvious now. For last 10 years, there has been a degree of consistency in your economic policy, and especially in the second term, the emphasis on reviving the economy, creating jobs has been very strong. You had the PLI scheme, which is important, because without a manufacturing base, you cannot really have a services economy that's going to generate the jobs of the future, right? So manufacturing itself has been highly automated, and so are services. But if without manufacturing output inside the country, enough of a certain volume of it, you cannot grow the service economy, which will actually create the jobs of the current and the future. So our problem is, historically till 1991, we were a disastrous economy, socialist economy that was busy destroying jobs and everything in sight. After 91, we had a very lopsided but aggressive growth. At least we got the growth part back in 1991. But the mistake was we liberalized the capital markets before we liberalized the other factor markets, which is land and labor and all that. Whereas China actually made labor market very flexible, which is why the entire supply chains, when the global supply chain shifted away from Europe and America, they went straight to China because they didn't need to look anywhere else. And China had the possibility of scale and things. Our problem, when you liberalize capital markets before other factor markets, the tendency will be to use capital instead of labor, which is why we lost about a quarter century of jobs growth that should have come along with GDP growth. It didn't happen. It's only now, long after we should have done it, we have started doing some of that. We are encouraging job creation and our thing. So our challenge are basically 3 or 4, which I'll list in a very short point. I'll go into detail in case we have the time. First, we have to get the growth. Definitely is a no-brainer. We must get growth of 6 to 7 minimum % and more if possible. Secondly, that growth needs to be oriented towards labor-intensive sectors rather than more capital-intensive, though capital-intensive will happen on its own. The last thing is we need to maintain social harmony as much as possible, because in the next 10 years, if we do not get to where we need to be, like today we are just over a $3 trillion economy. I think we will be a $10 trillion economy if we keep the social situation stable, and by around between 2032 and 2035, we will be a $10 trillion economy. After that is the time when India will be completely a big colossus on the world stage. We will be a number 3 economy, but we will carry huge heft. That's when the UN seat will come. That is when everything will come, because that $10 trillion, nobody will talk back to you. You have arrived. So that is the point. The next thing, I think if you remember in 2014, Modi ji said that, can we keep all our other problems aside for 10 years? Okay. Now, I think the time to repeat it is in the next 5 to 7 years. We should keep our social problems at bay. Even while we do it quietly, whatever you need to do, but you don't need to make it into a very highly polarizing issue. So that is where we need to be. And once we do that, we can actually, in any case, we will grow. 5% is a no-brainer for us. We need to get into 7 and 8 every year. For that, we need many things going. And these are the things we need to do. Thank you.
Thanks, Jaggi. Let me come to you, Hindol. When we were discussing, nothing is inevitable, as we have repeated a couple of times. But there have been some success stories and some not so successful stories over the past 3 decades. Obviously, the success story has been China, and we have looked at the double-digit growth for over 2 decades. But there was also Japan. I remember in 1989, when I was just starting college, Japan was the greatest success story, and US was on the decline. And Japan was leading the auto market, the electronics market, the semiconductor market. The stock market was at an all-time high. And then something happened. And we'll not get into the reasons of why that happened. But looking at that, and since you were alluding to that example, how would you look at some of the challenges that we have in the next 10, 20 years?
Yeah, I think Indians are very prone to 2 things. One is deification. We worship people very easily. And the other is hyperbole. We believe our own idea of greatness a little too quickly. So either we are despondent and everybody is despondent, but every little sign and immediately we sort of, seem to believe that we have almost hit where we need to hit. Let's be clear, we are getting there, but we are far away from it. You mentioned Japan. There is an earlier example to Japan also, Amit, and that's Holland. If you look a century before the Japanese example that you cited, Holland was one of the leading powers of the world, on the cusp of greatness, so to speak. And once again, like you said, something happened. Now, we don't have time today on this panel to go into what happened, but suffice it to say that something might happen to many countries. We should not take our path to greatness as guaranteed, right? I remember, and this is worth saying, I remember when Atalji had won, and he was assured of a 5-year term, first 5-year term. I remember the late Sushma Swarajji saying that we came to power first for 11 days, then for 11 months, and now we will be in power for 11 years. I'm always skeptical about any such statement like this. And I would like to believe it when it happens. Because we know that Atalji's great term ended at a particular point where, had it not ended, India wouldn't have had many problems that it faced later, right? Therefore, I think now that Modi ji has had 2 terms, we are as Jaggi said, we are at a very critical juncture. And let's be very clear, I am very worried today that in the year of India's G20 presidency, every effort is being made to create an incident in Punjab. Every effort is being made. Now, how it will be contained, in which manner and shape or form, we will wait to see. But it's worth noting that such an effort is being made. I am very worried that the caste legislation Pandora's box that many of us have been talking about for years has finally been opened in America. And mark my words from this stage, Seattle is not going to be the last place where this will roll out. The target of this entire caste legislation has nothing to do with Seattle. The real target of this legislation is India, and most importantly, it is Indian tech power in the United States. It is to break the back of Indian technological power and supremacy in the United States. So there will be every attempt to derail India's rise. Look, if you look at it very objectively, Amit, who wants India to rise apart from Indians? If you were one of the leading powers of the world today, would you want another billion-strong country to develop to $10 trillion and have its own mind?
They're already having a headache with China.
Exactly. Who wants another?
They have a headache with Japan, now with China.
So who wants another country which is 1 billion, a billion plus people, $10 trillion maybe, and with a mind of its own? The leading powers of the world want South Koreas. They don't want Indias. They want, in some senses, people or countries who are absolutely in tune to whatever they say. Right? So therefore, all of these things, we should be now, I would highly urge from this stage, from now to the next decade is a point of caution. And to ensure that nothing goes wrong. And this belief, we were very lucky to get a Prime Minister like Narendra Modi.
Absolutely.
Now, we need to maintain that momentum. How that momentum will be maintained? Who will maintain that momentum? In what shape and form? Jaggi alluded to an intractable land problem. We know what happened with the farmer legislation. People like me said that this farm law agitation has deeply embedded Khalistani roots. At that time, people said, no, this is all prejudice. But today, everybody can see what's happening. The same Deep Sidhu, who later died in a car crash, the same movement that he was running, this new character, who was a taxi driver in Dubai till recently. But it's no laughing matter. Sadly, it's no laughing matter. You saw the crowds at Golden Temple the other day. So I really want to advise and caution to all of us, right, that in our rhetoric, as Jaggi also pointed to, not only in our policy making, but also in our rhetoric, it's important to maintain a degree of caution. Let us get there first.
Right. No, I think very well said. Let me come to you, Shehzad, and I'll further extend this internal security issue, because while we have various challenges, there are economic challenges, there are engineering challenges, there are technology challenges for our growth. I think we've already started agreeing here that internal security and external security, basically national security, is an important issue, especially for a country like India. It's true for every country, but especially true for India. What would you look at that and talk about some of those and how we should be looking at them for the next 10 years, as Hindol said?
पहले तो धन्यवाद. क्या मैं हिंदी में बात कर सकता हूँ?
Sure.
देखिए, अर्थ के मंच पर अर्थव्यवस्था की बात कर रहे हैं. नाम भी अर्थ है, हिंदी में नाम है या संस्कृत, इंग्लिश में है, पर भाव हिंदी का है. या तो देखिए, सबसे पहले तो मैं कुछ हद तक आपकी बातों से पूरी तरह से इत्तेफाक रखता हूं कि इकोनॉमिक सुपर पावर एक टाइटल है. ये टाइटल की अलग अलग परिभाषा हो सकती है, पर अगर मुझसे पूछा जाए तो इकोनॉमिक सुपर पावर को अगर परिभाषित करना है तो उसका एक फॉर्मूला है जो मैं हमेशा इस्तेमाल करता हूं, वो है गीता फॉर्मूला. गीता फॉर्मूला, GITA. ये GITA अगर आपको दिख जाए, गीता अगर दिख जाए, तो मान सकते हैं कि आप इकोनॉमिक सुपर पावर बनने की श्रेणी में शामिल हो चुके हैं. गीता का मतलब क्या है? G फॉर ग्रोथ एंड गरीब, I फॉर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर एंड इन्वेस्टमेंट, T फॉर टेक्नोलॉजी एंड A फॉर आत्मनिर्भरता. तो ये गीता फॉर्मूला, देखिए, गीता देखना चाहिए, गीता को पढ़ना भी चाहिए और गीता को समझना भी चाहिए. तो अगर गीता दिखने लगे तो इकोनॉमिक सुपर पावर की तरफ आप जा रहे हैं, ये आप इसको अनुभव कर सकते हैं. अब मैं आपको चारों में बहुत शॉर्ट में बताता हूँ और आपके सवाल पे आता हूँ. G फॉर ग्रोथ, ये पहला ऐसा कालखंड है, अगर आपने देखा होगा, 2 वैश्विक चुनौतियों के बावजूद भी हमारी ग्रोथ रेट, जो कि IMF वैसे ही कह रही है कि फास्टेस्ट लार्जेस्ट ग्रोइंग इकोनॉमी है, इन्फ्लेशन की रेट से ऊपर रहा है. एक समय था वाजपेयी जी के ज़माने में, फिर जो कालखंड आया मनमोहन सिंह जी का, उस समय डबल डिजिट इन्फ्लेशन भी गया. आमतौर पर औसतम इन्फ्लेशन 8.5-9% का था प्रति वर्ष. आज वो इन्फ्लेशन स्पाइक भी हुआ है कोविड काल में, परंतु अगर एवरेज एनुअल इन्फ्लेशन निकाले तो वो 5% से कम रहा है और हमारी ग्रोथ रेट इन्फ्लेशन के ऊपर रही है. गरीबों को पॉवर्टी से निकालने की, कई लोग बोलते हैं कि हमने बहुत बड़ा काम किया. Average removal of people from poverty was at a rate of 8.5% during the entire period of 2004 to 14, which is right now from 2015 onwards to 22 at a rate of 11 to 12%, which is considerably higher. तो गांव और गरीब के ग्रोथ और गरीब के लिए कुछ हो रहा है. आपने देखा है कि आज जिस प्रकार से इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर के लिए ये बजट की भी बात हो, 10 लाख करोड़ दिए गए हैं. जिस रफ्तार पे हाईवे बन रहे, 200% फास्टर ग्रोथ रेट ऑफ हाईवेज, 11 किलोमीटर्स प्रतिदिन होता था, आज 37 किलोमीटर प्रतिदिन है. 70 वर्ष में 70 एयरपोर्ट हमने बनाए, पिछले 8.5-9 वर्ष में और 70 एयरपोर्ट ऐड कर दिया है. आज रेलवे स्टेशंस की बात करें या रेलवे की बात करें तो 2.4 लाख करोड़ हैज बीन इन्वेस्टेड इन रेलवेज फॉर सुविधा, सेफ्टी, स्टेशन एंड पैसेंजर कंफर्ट एक्सेट्रा. वंदे भारत ट्रेन शुरू हो चुकी है विच आर वर्ल्ड क्लास ट्रेन्स. टी से देखें तो टेक्नोलॉजी, और ये विषय आपके बहुत करीब है. जिस प्रकार से हमारी पूरी जनरेशन, और आप, आई एम ग्लैड कि वो हम जनरेशन से हैं जहाँ पर एक एक कागज़ के लिए हम इन लाइन खड़े रहते थे. आज मोदी जी ने ऐसा किया है कि इन लाइन वाले सब ऑनलाइन हो चुके हैं. ये वो जनरेशन है जिसने देखा है. वी हैव गॉन फ्रॉम VSNL कनेक्शन विच यूज्ड टू बी डायल्ड, और 5-10 मिनट होते थे तो मेरी माँ बोलती थी कि चलिए बंद करिए इसको, बिल लंबा आ जाएगा. 300 रुपया प्रति GB से आज 9 रुपये प्रति GB पे है. पूरा खान सर का क्लास और अर्थ की आप आई होप स्ट्रीम करके सब लोग यूट्यूब पे देख रहे हैं. ये वो जनरेशन है कि आज हमने 5, 5.5, 6 लाख किलोमीटर ऑप्टिकल फाइबर गांव तक डाल दिया है. तो ये केवल इंटरनेट इज नॉट जस्ट अवेलेबल इन दिल्ली, मुंबई, पुणे. इट हैज बिकम अ डिजिटल सेतु ऑफ मोदी जी. जस्ट लाइक राम सेतु कनेक्टेड Ramji's Janmabhoomi and Ramji's Bhoomi to Lanka, now we are connecting India and Bharat through digital setu of Modi ji. And the reflection of that is seen in whether it is UPI platform, the unified payments interface, the manner in which India is leading in that, or whether you see the CoWIN platform, or whether you see the JAM Trinity, whether it's private sector or delivery of public sector goods in an efficient, transparent manner, where 1 rupee sent by namesake of Rajeev Mantri is not eaten up by a mantri, but it goes to the person who deserves it. So
Goes to
this,
Rajeev.
Huh? Rajeev had said it, and Rajeev is experiencing it. कि आज जब imagine आज 25 लाख करोड़ रुपए प्रधानमंत्री जी ने भेजे गरीबों के लिए, तो 25 लाख करोड़ रुपए वहां पर पहुंचे. अगर राजीव के नेम सेक होते तो 25 लाख करोड़ में से 21 लाख करोड़ खा जाते और 4 लाख करोड़ पहुंचते.
Right.
ये बदला है. और आखिरी में अगर मैं देखूं तो आत्मनिर्भरता, इसमें एक ही आपको एक उदाहरण देता हूं. 2 मोबाइल फोन की फैक्ट्री थी हमारे देश में. मोबाइल फोन जैसी चीज इंडिया इंपोर्ट करता था, इससे हमारा फॉरेन एक्सचेंज कितना खर्च होता था. हमारे देश में जिस प्रकार की अब PLI स्कीम का जिक्र किया गया, ये PLI स्कीम इस प्रकार की लाई है कि जहां 2 मोबाइल फोन की फैक्ट्री हुआ करती थी, आज 200 मोबाइल फोन की फैक्ट्री है. सैमसंग और एप्पल के सबसे बड़े मैन्युफैक्चरिंग प्लांट नोएडा, ग्रेटर नोएडा में है. और आज हम $1 बिलियन के केवल सैमसंग और आईफोन्स एक्सपोर्ट करने की स्थिति में आ चुके हैं. ये आत्मनिर्भरता और मेक इन इंडिया का एक सबसे बड़ा उदाहरण. डिफेंस में जहां पर हर डिफेंस स्कीम वॉज टू बी अ डिफेंस स्कैम, आज हम लोग डिफेंस में जब 6 लाख करोड़ खर्च करते हैं तो इसमें इस प्रकार से अब चीजें बदली है कि हम आत्मनिर्भर होते हुए केवल इंपोर्ट की नहीं बल्कि डिफेंस एक्सपोर्ट्स विच हैव रीच 12,000 करोड़ दिस ईयर, दैट हैज आल्सो बीन अचीव्ड. एंड पीपल वांट आवर aircraft, light combat aircraft, somebody wants our missile, somebody wants some other equipment. So we have changed, and wherever you can see this Gita, wherever you see Gita, you see superpower. And you can see that Gita formula will lead us to economic superpower, whether we have the title or not. Now, as far as your internal security issues concerned, look, national security is a very important facet of ensuring that that stability remains. And only when that stability remains in this country, then we can have economic prosperity. Initially, and you would remember, Amit Bhai, that for never had we heard that there would be a terrorist attack in Pune. The only time a terrorist attack took place in Pune was an unfortunate time when the German bakery blast took place. Every
2010.
second or third week, there would be a Mumbai blast, Pune blast, Delhi blast, blast in Hyderabad, blast in other parts, Jaipur, Varanasi. We had become accustomed to living in blasts. Then there was the 26/11 attack. And it was primarily because the leadership of our country was not confident in giving a proper response. After 26/11, our armed forces were always strong, always competent, even at that time, even when they did not have the most modern equipment which we are giving them right now, but they were always capable of delivering a message to the enemy. But unfortunately, the political mindset was such, and Obama ji has written it in his book. I have not written it, I am not quoting from Obama ji and Manish Tiwari ji, both have written that how after 26/11, for some various extracurricular considerations, Dr. Manmohan Singh, despite Fali Major, telling him that here are these camps, we can go and take the action. There was no action taken. We gave most favored nation status to Pakistan. Today, in 8.5, 9 years, the transformation is that if there is a Uri, there is a surgical strike. If there is a Pulwama, there is a Balakot strike. And from MFN status, we have given MTJ status, Muh Tod Jawab status.
Good.
So when you have Muh Tod Jawab instead of MFN, I think the internal and national security is also secure.
Good.
And that is also important.
I think excellent summary. Rajeev, I mean, there's a lot to discuss on this topic, but let me first get a full round done before we get into individual specific questions. You've done a lot of work in policy. Jaggi briefly alluded to the manufacturing versus services discussion debate that we have had in India for the last 20, 30 years. And clearly by some accounts, our manufacturing play hasn't been as great as it should have been. Whether it should be what it's right now, around 14, 15%, should it be 20, should it be higher than 20, or where China was or is even higher, about 25%. But what would you like to see our policies going forward to achieve, as we have been saying, nothing is guaranteed. So to achieve this greatness that we've been talking about, when it comes to our growth in terms of our distribution between services, manufacturing, and other policy aspects of where this growth percentage-wise is going to come from?
I think I heard some of Jaggi sir's remarks. I think he alluded to factor markets and domestic liberalization continuing and so on. So I don't want to obviously repeat on that. I agree entirely with him. I will point to one aspect, which is essentially retrenching the state from many industries and businesses where even today it is heavily involved. So essentially, the government has spelled out already a program of privatization and of asset sales, where certain strategic industries have been identified. The government has said that they will retain businesses or a business presence only in those industries. I think, namely, they are defense, banking, power generation, and I think a couple of others. So aside from these industries, the government has committed that all the PSUs and all government involvement, direct government involvement, will be withdrawn, leaving the field for the private sector. So I think this was one of the most important policies enunciated by any government in independent India. I think nobody else has come out with such a clear statement of intent. But what obviously we need is that intent should be translated into actions. So now, why aren't we moving on that front? Probably because there are certain legal challenges to achieving divestment and privatization. There are certain political challenges because many of these are like companies with strong unions, strong labor unions, special interests which are opposed to privatization and so on. But I think the benefit that the country will see from government exiting business activity in almost all industries and allowing our private entrepreneurs free space to operate, with the government only providing a regulatory umbrella, मुझे लगता है इससे बहुत बड़ा फ़र्क पड़ेगा और ये जितने जल्दी हो सके ये देश की ऊर्जा जो उद्योग ऊर्जा है उसको रिलीज़ करेगा. तो ये I wish this was done actually even earlier, but here we are in the decade of 2020s and hopefully it will happen now.
Thanks. Jaggi, let me come back to you, just following up on that question. We talked about manufacturing, but again, I'm going to put a number. Should it be 15%? What should we aspire for in terms of manufacturing? Because all of us have been saying that we have not looked at manufacturing as critically as we should have. And such a large country can't just be a services-led economy. I mean, there were some people, I think about, I remember reading about this 10 plus years back, were saying that, oh, we have just bypassed manufacturing. We are, just as we were talking about the IT services and phones, just as we bypassed the landlines, we have just bypassed the manufacturing and we are just directly, I mean, that doesn't work that way. I mean, it may work for a small country like Singapore.
Are you referring to a famous economist and wannabe politician?
Is he wannabe still?
Let's not get into names, but okay, so seriously, what should be that? I mean, clearly what we have right now is not adequate, 14, 15%. But I don't think we can get to 30% where China is.
I think getting manufacturing to anything between 20 to 25% is very doable, and that will happen not by a shrinking of services, but by a shrinking of agriculture. The minute manufacturing starts growing and services also start firing on all cylinders, the jobs that are needed to take all the excess agriculture labor will start getting created. That is what we need to do. And together with that, an unrelated policy is sensible urbanization. Urbanization is the key to jobs. And I don't mean only Mumbai, Calcutta stuff. I think we need the second tier and third tier things need to have sensible kind of growth. Once you do that, we will get into a virtuous cycle of investment and growth. We need opportunities for agriculture to shrink sensibly, where the excess labor can be absorbed by manufacturing and other things. I don't believe this famous economist who said we should go only in services, because services cannot operate independently of manufacturing. The reason why you have services is it's only when a physical good has to be sent from A to B to C. I mean, can Amazon operate on the basis that there are nothing produced here? I mean, theoretically, we can import everything from China, and we can just flip burgers here and do whatever you need to do. But the thing is, without a core manufacturing base, even if it creates less jobs than what it would have created 30 years ago, we need that manufacturing base, because once you have the manufacturing, the services related to manufacturing is to this thing. Let me also say, manufacturing itself is transforming into a services business. Take a simple company like, say, Asian Paints. It is now saying it is a manufacturing company. Okay, it is a paints company. But they know that the real margins will not come from using the same raw materials and creating the same paint and selling it. Branding, of course, is part of the margins. But they are going forward into home decor and other things. These are services related to the painting thing, and it's not restricted to painting. So Asian Paints is actually transitioning from being just a manufacturing and branding company, marketing company, to a more services oriented thing. So all manufacturing will have an extension in services. And the third thing in manufacturing, which is only now beginning to happen, the negative thing that happened after demonetization and GST was that informal small and medium was curtailed. So basically, a lot of zombie companies actually went out, and it created pain. Now that sector is reviving more formally. They're getting formal finance, they are doing that. If you see the latest report of the CEA, he shows that MSME is suddenly springing back. The middle sector, the Mittelstand of German, which is innovative and creates jobs and high quality jobs, is now getting created. Over the next 5 to 7 years, those are the ones that will create good quality jobs in manufacturing and services. And I think we are, if Amrit Pal is not a problem, Amrit Kal will come through manufacturing and a reduction thing.
I think that's Hindol. So I think we've talked about infrastructure, we have talked about other areas as well. But one of the things that is going to be important for this transformation, for these new jobs, manufacturing and others, is skilling. And I think that's something that, I mean, there's been focus on this by this government, but somehow I think it still doesn't get talked about as much as it should. And I think there are some clear areas that we are lacking. What's your view on the whole skilling thing, especially as Jaggi mentioned, when we have 50+% of our economy which is in the agriculture sector, as it tries to move, how do we address that?
No, this is a very important point. I just want to take one point that Jaggi said. I completely agree that we have excess labor in agriculture. Anybody with their right minds would agree to this. But you know, often in the conversation about agriculture, I also do feel sometimes, not on this stage, but sometimes, agriculture tends to be undervalued a little bit. You know, they used to have a prime minister who said, why? So what if we don't grow food in India? We can import food, we're importing everything else, we can import food. That is a ridiculous assertion. Please understand, sovereignty of a nation is based on certain key ingredients of self-sufficiency, what we today call Atmanirbharta. Unless a nation is self-sufficient on certain key ingredients, there is no sovereignty. And sovereignty has no meaning, right? You cannot say that, oh, well, whatever we eat, somebody else will give us and then we'll buy. That means, that's not sovereignty, right? Also, critically, agriculture is important because in the next 15 to 20 years, there will be a food crisis in the world. The world does not have enough production mechanisms. With today's technology, you may say tomorrow there will be a massive enhancement of technology and so on and so forth, but I'm saying with today's technology and today's assessment, to feed in the entire population of the world. One of the major places where there will be a problem is China. You can already see China is buying large swaths of land, and farms in Africa to feed its population. They have one of their staple diet is pork, but they don't have enough pork. This entire cattle problem with Bangladesh that we have a problem. Most people don't understand why is there a problem and why are we not able to solve that problem entirely. It's not that Bangladesh is not cooperating. Of course, there's other problems with smugglers and so on and so forth. There is a demand supply issue. Bangladesh doesn't have enough cattle to fulfill the demand for that sort of food in that country. So where will it go? And please remember, Amit, as many people understand, look, some part of global warming we will not be able to stop. And if we can't stop it, as the seas rise, as the Bay of Bengal rises, a part of Bangladesh will be subsumed. That part of Bangladesh that will be subsumed, it's a country of 200 million people. At least 5 to 20 people, between 5 to 20 million people. Where will those people go? They will come towards India. Now, no democratic government, in fact, no government, forget democratic, can stop tens of thousands of people coming towards their border. What are they going to do? Tell the army to shoot those people? No, it's not possible. So, therefore, these are clear challenges that are coming for India. Therefore, food and supplying food, not only is it important for our sovereignty, I would strongly argue that it is a future strategic lever for us, right? So therefore, we need agriculture. However, we have too many people in agriculture. Agriculture productivity in India is one of the lowest in the world. Even much smaller countries like Vietnam and others have far higher agricultural productivity. The point about skilling is very important. You see, in India, we have this process where skilling is so bad, which is why some edtech companies have done great work, but you look at that entire sector with a little bit of question mark. You look at White Hat Junior, just to name a name.
You know what happened just last week.
Just look at White Hat Junior. It's a classic example. So, marketing can delude a lot of people in our country to believe that they have access to knowledge and skills which they actually don't. Therefore, it's one place where we need far deeper, not necessarily more, but deeper checks and balances and regulations so that skilling can be delivered. And that skilling is directly correlated to jobs. It's not like this White Hat Junior kind of rubbish, right? Where all these people will never be able to, transition into anything better.
Yeah. No, I think one area, especially when it comes to manufacturing skilling, that some countries that we should learn from and who have done an excellent job. Germany is one of them. And they have done a lot of what is called as apprenticeship-driven training or internship-driven training. And that's something that we've talked about, but we haven't adopted it as well, because a lot of the manufacturing training is ultimately not classroom training. It is going to be on-the-job training. And there are people as early as, after 8th or 9th grade who, after age 14 or after age 16, should be spending time on the shop floor, learning some of the skills.
So I'll just make one small point before you go to Rajeev. See, this is why the one district, one product is a good idea. Essentially, what is it? It is empowering local communities to continue a tradition of excellence. You mentioned and Jaggi also mentioned the Mittelstand, right? What is the Mittelstand? It is small companies, but who produce excellence in one thing. They may make one screw, but that one screw is the best in the world, right? So if you want the best in the world in that category of screws, you will go to that company, right? So that one district, one product idea is a very good idea. Because what was to happen, or what was happening to us is, all those skill sets were being lost. The people who had the skill sets of metallurgical work, for instance, were becoming security guards in our societies, which is a total waste of generations of knowledge.
Yeah. No, I think you mentioned about Atmanirbharta. I think Shehzad had also alluded to that in his opening remarks. I think that is something that is especially important when it comes to key strategic industries. And of course, it starts with food, but it also includes core manufacturing. It obviously includes defense. It includes other key building blocks of the 21st century, which is semiconductors. I mean, that's something that I had a separate panel discussion just 2 days back. And when it comes to some of these key manufacturing elements, it was very interesting. Just yesterday, I was at a conference where Piyush Goyalji made a very, very strong remark about how we have become dependent on the most basic manufacturing goods on China, where our trade or trade deficit was of the order of $1 billion not long back, 10, 20 years back. Now this year we have got to 100. And he was urging companies in India to look at Atmanirbharta seriously. Why is it that for every small thing, or for, he actually gave an example, for saving 10 paisa, do you always have to go to the cheapest source? And that is something, so Atmanirbharta, I think, is not just a word or a phrase. I think it needs to be inculcated in all aspects of a way a product is built, right? From sourcing, from manufacturing. And I think that is, whether it's agriculture, whether it's manufacturing, we as the third largest economy that we aspire to can't rely on any foreign source for these kind of things, right? And COVID again made it very clear in terms of vaccines or some of the other things. Rajeev, can you expand on this?
No, I just wanted to mention before coming to that, on a little bit on taxes.
Okay.
So I think at this point in India, fairly universal agreement that share of manufacturing should increase, share of agriculture should decline. Labor force occupied in agriculture should also be reduced. But do we even discuss on why agriculture income is not taxed at all?
Good point.
So why are we prioritizing the income of someone who's making, let's say, 10 lakh rupees in agriculture over someone who makes 10 lakhs from manufacturing? What is the difference between the two of them? You know, poor people are anyway excluded from taxes. They don't have to pay taxes. The lower income groups are never taxed, right? But when it comes to even corporate income, certain types of agriculture companies are excluded completely. I think this is a major flaw in our tax system, which needs to be corrected. Because at the same time that we are trying to push manufacturing, reduce labor concentration in agriculture, we are doing nothing about a very strong incentive, actually. And not just a strong incentive, it is also a major channel for laundering of, frankly, black money. There are people who are pushing their own income through agricultural channels just to escape the tax net. So this is एक विकृति है, it's a distortion in the tax system which should be fixed.
Good point. Shehzad, we've, again, let me come back to you specifically on the topic of Atmanirbhar Bharat. There are countries that have done this really, really well. Now, since you've talked about it and it's part of your Gita, can you expand on specific sectors that we should be prioritizing going forward? We have talked about agriculture, manufacturing, but if you can drill a little bit deeper and say what areas and what do we need to do? I mean, skilling is one. Are there any other areas that we need to look at? Is there a fundamental focus as a nation, right? I mean, again, I'm going back to what Piyush said. I think we don't realize this is, many times Atmanirbhar or Swadeshi sourcing is looked down upon because for a long time the world was talking about free trade. And how you have to be the most optimal and source something from wherever it's cheapest. Just optimize it, right? Well, last few years, world has realized that that's now not exactly the best thing to do. You have to look at your interests first, even if something may be a little bit more expensive. So how do we really realize this vision of becoming Atmanirbhar?
Look, going forward, I think that there will be 3 areas where we need to focus. And in a couple of those areas, Atmanirbharta push is required. One is, of course, manufacturing. One is pharmaceuticals. And one is becoming the knowledge hub of the world. We can become the pharmacy of the world, the manufacturing hub of the world, and the knowledge and innovation center of the world. So I call it PMK. Now some people can take other meaning also from it. So PMK of the world we can become. They have to mend their ways. But PMK for sure. Simply because pharmacy of the world also, if you see, I'll give you a small example and it connects to our city again. For years and years, and before I was born, my mother and my grandmother have told me, it used to take decades for our vaccine to come once it has been launched in the world. The vaccine drive would be launched 20, 30 years later. This is the only time that when a pandemic struck, at the time when globe was developing a vaccine for its own self, we developed not one but 2 Atmanirbhar vaccines, and both of those vaccines have have been very successful. They haven't been duds like the vaccine in China or the Pfizer vaccine, the kind of controversy we've seen. And today we have not only been able to give 220 crore doses in our own country, but we have been able to even send the vaccine doses to various other countries under Vaccine Maitri. India is being looked at this one area, and for that also, if you see, we have already started for pharmacy and pharmaceuticals. We are not only creating the right kind of infrastructure, but even we are creating the bulk drug park. The foundation has been laid in Himachal Pradesh. We are investing heavily in this. We have many schemes to cater to that. As far as manufacturing is concerned, lot of detail has been spoken about that. In that manufacturing sector also, we must pay particular attention to manufacturing of devices that will help us connect with the digital world. Because in digital world, we are going to have a great transformation which are already undergoing. And in Industry 4.0, whatever we are assuming right now, the traditional means of manufacturing, those are going to change. It is not going to be driven by the way we are assuming right now. Do we really need to invest so much in skill training as we contemplate is also a question, because look, we are anyways, the national new education policy is focusing on skill training. We have PM Kaushal Vikas Yojana. We have the new scheme of Vishwakarma. That is also on skill. But after the artificial intelligence induced technologies that we are going to get, do we really need skills in the traditional sense, or do we need skills that are able to use artificial intelligence and deliver the output? Do we need more soft skill training? Do we need more life skills training? Then we need skill training of a particular manufacturing process. Tomorrow it might be possible, and it might sound very far-fetched, but it might be possible that somebody who has absolutely no knowledge may, with the help of artificial intelligence, be able to repair a car or or do a basic surgery also. Do we really need to skill train that person for that? So we have to look 50 years forward and see what kind of skills also we need to impart. And thirdly, knowledge and innovation. That is where we must focus on. If you see the focus of our entire approach in the last 8-9 years, these institutions of excellence, whether it is IITs, whether it is AIIMS, whether it is IIMs, whether it is all other knowledge centers, we are making more of them so they become more accessible to people. Every year we built a new IIM, every year we built a new IIT, and secondly, we are trying to take it on digital so that the access can be improved. I think these things together will help us become more Atmanirbhar in these areas. Of course, policy measures are there. We can give a particular incentive to push the promotion, to promote the manufacturing in a particular area, etc. But the larger focus has to be on these areas, and that is what this government is also doing.
Good. I think there's a good perspective on skilling. I think one thing that has been discussed is what we need to learn. I mean, this is not just India, but for the entire world in the age of AI, for the next 20, 30 years, is learning to learn more than learning a specific skill, which is basically learning to be adaptable to learn a new technology or a new thing that comes up, which may not be there today, but we need to be geared to understanding that, picking that up.
Do you know many people are using ChatGPT to write code, and these are coders?
Yes.
So do I need to learn coding anymore?
Yeah.
I can do it on, I'm saying don't use it for your projects, ChatGPT, but this is the way the world is moving.
So I think, I thought I had 10 to 15 more minutes, but I think I have 5 more per dynamic change. So maybe we can take 2 quick questions from the audience. Anyone with a mic?
सर मेरा क्वेश्चन शहजाद पूनावाला सर से है। सर आपने इंडियन रेलवेज की बात की थी। सर उसमें अभी बहुत सारा इलीगल ऑक्यूपेशन है, बहुत वाइड एरिया में।
Yeah, please be brief and quick question so that we can get more.
सर तो क्या वो इंडियन गवर्नमेंट रिमूव करेगी उन इलीगल ऑक्यूपेंट्स को जो बहुत बड़े एरिया में इंडियन रेलवे के एरिया के अंदर ऑक्यूपाई करके बैठे हैं?
देखिए, ये इसमें ज़्यादा डिटेल में जाने का अभी समय नहीं है, परंतु अगर कोई इलीगली स्क्वाट कर रहा है और रेलवे की ज़मीन है, तो जहाँ जहाँ रेलवे के क्लेम्स बनते हैं उसको लीगल प्रोसेस से उसको रिक्विजिशन करके उस पर जो भी हमें ट्रैक ले करना है, जो भी इस्तेमाल करना है, वो किया ही जाता है. कोर्ट्स मस्ट ऑल्सो अंडरस्टैंड दैट if an asset or a land belongs to certain government agency, then they must not put a premium on people illegally occupying it. I understand that there have been some areas where some past governments have incentivized. ये incentivize किया गया है कि लोग उस पे जाकर कब्जा करें, पर अब ये कब्जा छुड़ाना भी ज़रूरी है, लीगली छुड़ाना ज़रूरी है, ऑल्टरनेटिव देकर छुड़ाना ज़रूरी है, और कोर्ट को भी इसमें थोड़ा सा प्रोएक्टिवली उसको इंसेंटिवाइज नहीं करना चाहिए.
Okay, I think we have only 2 minutes, so and I see Anand in the audience, and so I'm going to repeat his phrase and give 30 seconds to each of the 4 panelists here. One quick starting question: should we aspire for 10% growth, or is 8 is fine, or even 6 or 7 is fine? But you have 30 seconds each.
No, I think 8% plus is eminently doable. I think we have all the pieces in place. Productivity-driven growth sustained at 8% plus is, I think, should be the target for us for the next couple of decades at least.
I think if India's social situation holds, and if there aren't any major disturbances to its social and security situation, 8% plus is absolutely doable. I think all the ingredients, as Rajeev was just saying, have fallen into place. But I must add a line of caution. We must be extra vigilant to ensure that nothing disturbs, especially nothing in terms of social disturbance or security disturbance occurs to derail this.
Absolutely. Shehzad?
IMF has already predicted that we are going to be the fastest, largest economy, growing economy in the world. We are poised to do 6 to 7% at this stage in the world economy. I think that is a good area. But going forward, we must focus on 3 things: clicks, digital; bricks, infrastructure; and fix. Fix a lot of things that we have not been able to fix. No, not the fixing that Robert Wada does. Fix, we had only 38% toilet coverage, 100% toilet coverage. Yes. Or when you have 10 crore taps, that opportunity cost of the woman sitting at home or wasting her time and becoming a productive asset in the economy, that also adds lots to the economy. So clicks, bricks, and fix.
Your TLAs are excellent 3-letter acronyms. Jaggi?
See, the social safety net has been spread well and in a sensible way by the Modi government. So that's a good thing that's in place. What is not happening is that at the state level, there has to be far more reforms. Most of the reforms have been center-led, whereas the real problems which entrepreneurs face is at the state level. Yeah. So the states need to join that reform bandwagon. Last thing, one point on skilling. I'll just mention this. Skilling is not a supply side problem, meaning we are looking at it as though we have to put efforts to skill people, whereas what you said was the right thing. That is, industry must be incentivized, if necessary, subsidized to take up the job of skilling, because skilling happens only on a job. I mean, okay, whatever theoretical knowledge you can do can come from elsewhere, but skilling is a demand side problem, not a supply side problem.
Yes. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you, Rajeev. Thank you, Hindol. Thank you, Shehzad. And thank you, Jaggi. This was a great discussion. We would have liked to have more time, but I think we touched upon a lot of different issues that I would have liked to cover. So thank you very much.